The relationship between the Mafia and the Roman Catholic Church has been punctuated by silences, ambiguous episodes, and definite stances, such as the recent one of Pope Francis, who, in 2015, reiterated the words of Pope John Paul II and invited the bosses to conversion with this peremptory phrase: Mafiosi are not in communion with God. They are excommunicated. But in the Vatican City, the Roman Catholic Church hasn't always been so unbalanced, and it's known to many that within the same ecclesiastical structure there are conflicting ideas, different and not always honest individuals who over the years, and most often in secret, have contributed to the rise to power of Sicilian organised crime. Over the centuries, the Roman Catholic Church has given its representatives spiritual and temporal power, which is still very strong today, and it is to be expected that there is corruption within it. In a sense, the world of the Mafia seems much clearer about its relationship with religion. As we've seen in other videos on this channel, its symbols and rituals are abundantly embedded within the criminal structure, and there's no mafioso who isn't baptised, and therefore Catholic. For them, there is no contradiction between the role of criminal and that of Catholic, and often many bosses use the religious cult to increase their prestige and be respected by the family and all other individuals living in the territory. There are really few cases of mafia bosses against the tide who have officially and publicly proclaimed themselves atheists. The most famous character is certainly the fugitive Matteo Messina Denaro, the dangerous boss of Cosa Nostra. And we do strongly advise to watch our videos on Matteo Messina Denaro if you haven't seen them already. Now, there's always a lot to say about Matteo Messina Denaro, also known as Diabolique. But here we want to deepen only his religious thought, so different from the typical mafioso. In fact, Denaro is a man who does not believe in God, as he reveals in his letters. Denaro openly manifests a nihilistic thought. That is, he sees negatively the values and institutions of the world, and he supports the non-existence of morality. His words are very clear. There was a time when I had faith. Then all of a sudden, I realized that something inside me was broken. I realized that I had lost my faith, but I did nothing to find it again. At the end of the day, I lived well with it. I am convinced that after life, there is nothing, and I am living as fate has destined me. Matteo Messina Denaro's exchange of letters with the mysterious figure who had the codename Svetonio reveals the personality of a boss who, perhaps in his atheism, has consciously distanced himself from a cult that could save his soul, but that was irreconcilable with his being a mafioso. However, his is an atypical case, and generally the mafioso do not care about this moral contradiction. And in part, this attitude is due to the ambiguous position of silence that the Church has occupied for several years. Since the Second World War, the clergy has never closed its doors to the Mafia. And despite the voices of several priests and bishops who criticised and lashed out against criminal organisations, it was only with the murder of Don Pugliese that the first real break between the two worlds occurred. With Matteo Messina Denaro, an example of atheistic mafia has been mentioned, but there are instead many other moments that have contributed to create a collective mindset that closely binds the two worlds, that of the Roman Catholic Church and the Mafia. The territory involved is always that of southern Italy, especially Sicily. And here, for many decades, organised crime found no enemies in the clergy. The latter was committed to opposing communism and wasn't worried by a group of criminals that they still saw as Christian families. This underestimation of the phenomenon by the Roman Catholic Church created, over time, a huge amount of damage that slowly today it's trying to repair. But the people, the main victim of the ferocity of Cosa Nostra, had been a spectator to this silent collaboration. The Sicilian clans have taken advantage of this to create a strong identity, capable of integrating into the community and being forcibly accepted. On the other hand, the territorial clergy lost credibility. And this is demonstrated by many subtle signs present in literature, poetry and local songs. One example is the song of Ignazio Butita, a Sicilian dialect poet, who writes Mafia and Parini. The term Parini indicates priests, and the poet clearly expresses himself in this regard. In fact, his song begins with "The Mafia and the priests shook hands. Poor citizen, poor villager." Others who drew a negative and unappreciative figure of the priest were also great exponents of Sicilian literature, such as Sciascia, Vierga and Camilleri, amongst others. Unfortunately, the similarities between the Mafia and the Roman Catholic Church have always been many, as history shows. The search for power, intrigue, blackmail, omerta, ambition, selfishness. Ecclesiastical characters, very similar in manners and intentions to unscrupulous criminals, crowd the pages of many literary works set in southern Italy, such as, for example, Il giorno della civetta by Sciascia and Bolla di Componenda by Camilleri. And here, the clergy is more mafia than the mafia itself, and a friend of the criminals. And this reality is not pure invention and does not remain in novels alone. Instead, the books recount a state of affairs that will continue for far too long, and will contribute to the awareness that there is too much ambiguity between the Mafia and the Vatican. Fortunately, the last few years have shown how the Roman Catholic Church has taken an increasingly opposing stance towards the Christian Mafia, thanks to the words of the Pope and the action of numerous members of the clergy, who have fought and continue to fight against violence and humiliation. Notwithstanding the apparent religiosity of the Mafia structure, in fact, organised crime has on several occasions demonstrated its hatred against the clergy, particularly towards those men of the Church who don't mind their own business and who intervene out of turn to take youngsters off the street, help those who are forgotten, and remove all these victims from a devious and unscrupulous criminal machine. The Mafia uses the structure, language and rituals of Catholicism because they suit their own purposes, stripping the cult of its true essence, namely love of thy neighbour, material poverty and spiritual wealth, humility and forgiveness. All concepts that have been overturned by the Mafia, which is nothing but a distorted mirror of Christianity that stands under the banner of violence, humiliation of others and the cult of power. So, there you have it, another intriguing resume of the many aspects of organised crime in Italy. But we've loads more videos in the pipeline looking at all sorts of aspects of organised crime, and particularly the utterly fascinating individuals who have risen through the ranks to lead these global syndicates throughout their history. So, do make sure you subscribe so you don't miss when we release the next one. And of course, if you did enjoy the video and want more, why not give us a little like down below whilst you're at it. Many thanks, and we'll see you next time.